What up, everybody? Welcome to the School of Ink and Arts. I'm Eric Hare, and in this lesson, we're going to cover line work and dot work as it pertains to this geometric piece here. This lesson requires your stencil, our machine, which is the FYT Evo Wireless Tattoo Machine, a 3-round liner for dot work, a 7-round shader for line work and pack and black, a 9-curve mag for pack and black and for shading. We're also using dynamic triple black and the dynamic gray wash set. Remember, while a lot of the line work and dot work principles we're going to cover apply to other styles, it's important to keep in mind we're going to be using these specific techniques here because it applies to what we're doing here today. In the last lesson, I showed you how to design the tattoo in Geometrica and how to print it from Procreate. Now we're going to continue with the application of the stencil. We've already covered how to properly apply stencils in Chapter 2, so be sure to check back if you need a refresher. Biggest piece of advice for line work is make sure you know what you're doing before you start doing line work. The more practice you have, the easier it's going to be. But yeah, I think just make sure you know what you're doing. Make sure you're familiar with the design, make sure you're familiar with the piece, make sure you know how you're going to attack it. You want to hold your machine at a 90-degree angle, because when you do, it's going to evenly distribute the line width. You want to have even line work, you want to make sure it's at a 90-degree angle, because if you tilt your machine and then you move it this way or back this way, it's going to cause your line work to be uneven. So in geometric pieces, you want to have every single line width and length to be the same. When doing dot work, there's more room for error, as long as you're following that stencil with dot work. Because when you do line work, if you run a line, you have to make sure it's solid and saturated. If you're doing dot work, you can kind of skip through it real quick and come back to it and clean it up. With line work, you're gonna run into more problems when trying to clean up that line if it's not solid in the first place. If you mess up a tattoo, try to remember if you weren't prepared, what caused that thing to mess up. I mean, I feel like everyone is gonna mess up at some point during a tattoo. Sometimes you might mess up in every tattoo. It's good to try to hide it and not let it know. Don't freak out, just kind of try to stay calm and just go back and do your best to fix it. Sometimes you might have to wait for the tattoo to heal to go back and fix it, but if you can clean it up then, clean it up then. So for this particular piece, we're gonna start with solid black and we're gonna fade into a gray. We're gonna be doing solid black with the dynamic triple black, and then we're gonna be using gray wash to do dots to give it kind of a fade effect. So we're starting at the bottom of the tattoo. If you're right-handed, you wanna start from the right and work to the left. If you're left-handed, you wanna start from the left and work to the right. The reason why is because you wanna preserve that stencil. If you're starting on the opposite side of the stencil, your palm is gonna smudge the stencil, causing it to disappear, causing you to be more stressed. Make sure you're pulling your lines instead of pushing them. When you pull your lines, it gives you more control. When you push them, it causes your line work to become wobbly. For this piece, we're gonna be using line work and dot work. We're gonna make the bottom part of the stencil black, so that's gonna be solid. As it goes up the arm, it's gonna fade into a gray. So we're using different gray washes to achieve that effect. I adjust my hand wherever I think it needs to be. That way I'm always pulling my line. I cannot emphasize enough about pulling line work. Never pulling away from me, always trying to pull the lines towards me. When I wipe the stencil, I want to wipe it away from the rest of the stencil. So I'm wiping it to the left, because on this case, the stencil is going up. So I'm starting at the bottom. Another technique you can do is to dab it. That way, you're not wiping any of the ink anywhere. The only problem with that is it still will leave some ink on the surface of the skin. So what I like to do is just kind of wipe it away. Since I know that these two little areas down here are gonna be black, I'm gonna go ahead and pack that black in using just small circles. Try not to do too much. I don't want to tear up the skin, so I just work slow. It's always good when you're packing black to turn your machine down. And just do small circles. Wipe, see how it is. Make sure you get all those areas up against the line. You don't want to leave what are called holidays. Just want to check, make sure everything is saturated. If you see little areas that need to be filled in, just go fill those spaces in. Main thing is you don't want to go over it too much. Be sure to apply some of the A&D ointment. When packing, I do hold my machine at a 45-degree angle. Do small circles and just keep moving. Wiping away, making sure everything's there. Sometimes what I'll do too is I'll go through the whole design and then come back and check it, let everything, kind of let the plasma die down. So that was all done with the 7. Just want to make sure, again, clean up those lines before moving on. It's pretty solid. When it's saturated, it's solid black. There's not going to be any gaps in between each section, so you'll be able to see basically just solid black. You want to be careful too, not to go too deep. You'll see a lot of bleeding if that does happen. Maybe add a couple little flourishes. So once the outline is complete, make sure to go back and check all the edges and lines. You want to make sure all the lines are connected, everything is saturated fully. If not, you're going to want to go back and kind of clean it up. Don't spend too much time doing it because you don't want to cause too much trauma to the skin, but just make sure everything looks crispy and clean. When doing dot work, you want to go with a medium gray wash and map out the areas where the stencil is. That way you can erase the stencil later and go back and see where the design is. I use a medium gray wash because if I do my dots darker, I can't go backwards. So if I use a medium gray wash, I can go in with a 40%. I know that it's gonna be 40%. If I do my dots in black and go back with a 40%, those dots are gonna stand out. So if I know that I'm gonna do all the dots starting at 40 and going to black, I'm gonna start with the 40 first. So you wanna start with the lightest gray that you have. So now we're gonna be switching to the 3-round liner. The reason why is because the 3-round liner is used for dot work. The 3-round liner is so tight, it's 3 needles stuck together, and it punctures the skin really easily. If you're gonna do dot work with a 7, it's gonna leave bigger, chunkier dots, which in the end look a little ugly. A 3-round liner, you have more range. You're able to do the dots smaller, so you have more area to work with. It just basically, the end result is gonna be a cleaner design. Now I'm gonna be switching to the 3-round liner, because we're gonna start doing dots. I'm gonna start with my 60% gray wash. With the 3-round liner, you wanna make sure your machine's turned down. I usually run it at like between 6.5 and 7, whatever's more comfortable to you. I'm gonna turn it down since I haven't used this machine before. Turn it down to about 6.7. And then I'll start going around the design, putting my dots as reference points. What that does is that kind of keeps that shape there so I can come back in and fill it in. When applying dots, you want to make sure that the machine is held in the same, you're using the same amount of pressure. That way all the dots are even. And so as I mark out the section, now I know that I can go back and just fill that area in. If you ever get that, like what I was talking about in the lesson, where too much ink goes into the cartridge, you can always just dab it away with a napkin and then go back and just kind of fill in the area with the dots. And when doing dot work, you just barely have to touch the skin. You don't have to really use a lot of pressure, because with the 3, it's gonna penetrate pretty easily. And for this, I'm gonna try to saturate, basically I'm gonna saturate the whole area. Kind of give it one little pass, check it out, make sure to see if I wanna go back and add more dots to make it more black. Because you have to know when this heals, it's gonna lighten. So So I saturate the whole area with dots. And since this area is 60, it's gonna be a lot lighter than this black, which is gonna look pretty cool. I'm gonna turn the machine up just a little bit more because it's not working good enough for my hand speed. I had my machine turned down, and me turning it up allows me to move quicker. It was at 6.7, now it's at 7.1. But you want to be really careful when turning up your machine when using a 3, because if you go too deep, you're going to get what's called a blowout, and blowouts will cause that ink to spread. So I'm barely just like touching the skin. I'm not using a lot of pressure at all. And just barely touching it. I'll do a couple of these shapes with this 60%. And what this is going to do is it's going to give us a gradient from dark to light. You can always get creative with how you do this. It doesn't always have to be black and then 60 and then 40 and then 20. You can always do like black, solid black, maybe black dots, maybe 80, or you can do like black and then 20. I mean, you can kind of get creative with the way you do it. The technique is always gonna be the same. But I'm just trying to make sure that each area is saturated. So I know when that heals, that's gonna be 60. Now I go to my next ink, the next cup, and I'm gonna do 40. So we'll do a few of these 40. I'm just dotting out the area. It's really close to this other tattoo, so I'm trying to not mess up that design either. And normally what I would do is I would go and dot all this stuff out first, but since we're only doing a small section, I don't really need to do that. When working with like larger pieces, you want to make sure to go and dot it out first because you don't want the design to disappear. And see, I'm just kind of doing dots really quick, just as a placeholder, and then as I wipe it away, you can go in and just kind of add more detail. Make sure you have enough ink in your cartridge, otherwise you're going to be doing dots and the ink's not going to be going in. One useful technique when doing line work and dot work is sometimes if you feel like it's not saturating enough, if you've been working for a couple hours on a piece, you can clean your needle in your water cup. You can put your needle in your water cup and kind of rinse off all the like plasma and the, you know, just the gel that can get accumulated in the tip. Working quickly because I know the technique and I know what I'm doing. If I was to just start this, if I'd never done dot work before, I'd be working really slow, trying to make sure that the pressure is applied evenly. Kind of go back and be more intentional with the dots just to fill in the spaces that are open. And as I keep using the 20% gray wash, I can tell it's going to be a lot lighter than everything else. It's kind of the effect we're going for, wanting it to go from dark to light. Yeah, with the 3, it's really good because you can get a better gradient. The dots are going to be small, so you're able to do more. Like you can fade or do, you know, also shade with the 3, but basically wanting this one to be fully saturated, and then the one I do above it will be a little lighter. And so with the light gray wash, if I want it to be lighter than the 20, I'll just turn my machine down really low so it's barely touching the skin. That way when the needle hits it, it won't fully saturate. It's another way to get it a little lighter with the same gray wash. I want the dots to be really, really light. I got my machine turned down to 6.4. So it's just barely touching. It just kind of adds that, makes that gradient a little better, so when it heals, it'll heal even lighter than the 20 down here, because we want it to kind of fade off. Just kind of fill those areas in. Not really caring about the detail because it's going to be fading off anyway. Maybe have some of these fading off. I haven't dipped my needle either in a minute, so it's not going to be fully black, or fully, it's not going to have that gray wash. It's going to have, get the gray wash, the 20 gray wash, and fade it off from this side. And as I go further out from the center, kind of let this dot space out more. Gives a cool little fade effect. Yeah, because see, even with the 20% gray wash, so this is the same as this, but the difference is I'm just like barely, yeah, I'm barely touching it, bro. And if I'm down here closer to, like, I'm closer to this section, so I'm wanting to saturate more dots in that area. And then as I go out further, I just kind of, you know, just kind of, you see I'm barely touching it. And you can do that with everything. I just kind of, I can't make sure everything is solid. Yeah, I think that's cool, dude. And there you have it. Just want to make sure that's stencil. Yeah, I think that looks cool. So this is green soap. I'm just wiping off the rest of the stencil so we can see the tattoo. Kind of check it, make sure everything looks solid. Yeah, when that purple stencil's away, you can see it better, and if you look, you can see how it goes from black. This is, you know, a darker gray, and then as it goes up here, it's really, really light. And when it heals, these are gonna drop even lighter. Checking to make sure all the dots are where they need to be. Making sure I didn't miss any of these little spaces, which I did. So I'm gonna go back in and touch that part right there. I missed a little triangle right there. Just wanna make sure the stencil, the design is how you want it to be, really. I might clean this little section up here too. Now with that purple stuff gone, I can, like I said, go back and check my line work. If you spend just a few minutes after the tattoo's over, or after you think the tattoo's done, just spend a few minutes checking everything. It can really make a big difference on how the tattoo turns out. You want to make sure when you're tattooing to always have a plan of how the tattoo is going to be at the end result. If I'm going into a tattoo and I didn't know that I was going to do this black and go to gray, it could have turned out differently. I would have been all over the place. It would have caused it, you know, it's going to make the tattoo take longer. Me knowing that I'm going black, gray, lighter, 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 it allowed for me to have a plan of action. I knew that I was going to start here, I'm going to finish there, as opposed to me going in and just kind of like, oh, let me wing it. Wow, I can try something new. Like, you never want to do that when someone's paying to get tattooed. So you always just want to know what you're doing in advance. Have a good solid plan. Thank you for joining me on this lesson. I'll see you in the next one.